Hi, it's Alistair here from Revolution InfoSec. I hope that you're having an absolutely wonderful day. Today I've got a story for you, like always. And the story today is about the boardroom. Yep, you heard me right. A boardroom which is, well, very bored. And they're bored at listening to the particular rants and raves of one individual. This individual happened to be the Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, but it could also relate to probably anybody who works in a technical role. That could be the Chief Science Officer, the Chief Technology Officer, the Chief Information Officer, or maybe even the Chief Financial Officer. But basically, the people in this story were worried about listening to what this particular person had to say, and it was really getting on at them. So here's what happened with this story and how it all worked out in the end. If you're either on the board of a company and have somebody that sounds a bit like this, or if you're in one of those CICE kind of roles and you wonder if your message comes across in the right way to the board, then this is the video for you. Having worked with executives for many years now in New Zealand, I've started to notice a bit of a trend when it comes to the people that we promote from within the ranks, especially when it refers to promoting technical people from technical roles to management roles. This isn't necessarily within the same company. It can also happen to individuals as they try to climb the corporate ladder in search of more money, perhaps. They've shown success in technical roles, and then perhaps in technical leadership roles, and then mentoring. So perhaps the next logical step of their career is some sort of management role, or even senior management role. The big problem with this model is that oftentimes, especially here in New Zealand, these individuals are not fully mentored or trained to go into a senior role, or especially into a board position. They come straight out of their happy place at the keyboard and are faced with a different set of skill requirements around the boardroom table. When it comes to roles that report directly to senior leadership, such as CIO, CTO, or CISO, I've started to see a trend where people who have been either in technical roles before end up in these roles. And well, that's all fair and well, but what happens or ends up happening is that these individuals aren't prepared for the needs of the executive. Specifically in the terms of the CISO, I've heard an alarming amount of feedback from the executives of companies saying that they've got a lot of technical jargon and wasted their time from their CISO, which is not helpful. I've recently asked the CISO of an organisation what they felt their purpose was, and the individual said to me that it was to build a secure organisation using a combination of the right technologies and frameworks. I went along with it, but I asked the person how they provided the information to their peers on the board. The CISO then said that they would tell senior management that they had deployed a new file with an IPS on it, and they'd replaced their VPN and spent money on an EDR solution and updated their ISO 27 compliance, blah blah blah, and so forth. So I asked the CISO at that point how they felt that went down when speaking with the board. And the CISO said, I think it went down really well, actually. And I asked the board how they felt of the CISO. And they said that their CISO was a really nice person and had deployed a lot of security measures to their knowledge, but they dreaded their business briefs with the CISO. So I asked, why is this? And they said, well, whatever the CISO tells us, it's all kind of ones and zeros. And I could see the problem straight away. But neither the CISO nor the board were willing to say out loud what the obvious elephant in the room was. So I asked the CISO what they felt the needs of the board were regarding cybersecurity. And again, the CISO mentioned a bunch of fairly technical improvements that had been made to the benefit of the organisation. I changed tack and then asked if the CISO was aware of what the company's profit and loss looked like. And the CISO said no, the CISO was a member of the board and was unaware of the profit and loss and had no idea about what financial risk the company was in should a cyber event happen that would take out the entire company's operations. I asked how the CISO got their security budget, and they said, truth be told, I just kind of put my finger up in the sky each year and hoped it would be enough. The CISO had no idea about what the worth of a cyber risk was to the organisation that they worked for. They had no clear understanding of the cost of the assets that the company owned. Furthermore, hadn't matched those assets with their potential risk criticality score. So in short, the CISO would have no idea about what the value of the company's assets were. For clarity, when I say assets, I'm talking about the people that work for the company, the goods and services, as well as depreciable fixed assets that the company might have. I asked the CISO at this point, what do you think a board want to know in a board meeting? I got a strange answer. The CISO replied, well, they want to know that their business is secure. Now, the CISO is partially correct, but that isn't the whole answer. I asked another way. Excluding the report from the CISO, what is the general purpose of a board meeting? The CISO took a moment and said to understand if the business is trading well, what the profits are, what the risks to the business are, and any strategic moves they might want to make. Aha, I said, that's it. So I followed up and I asked, what part of your delivery to the executive talked about the profit and loss of the business versus the risks that you are aware of? And the CISO thought for a good while and said, honestly, none. The CISO had been in an engineering role before and never really been briefed by the executive on what they should be saying to the board. The CISO also got to report to the board for a short 20 to 30 minute session, and then the board didn't disclose the P&L or on-track earnings to the CISO. So the CISO was essentially running blind without this information. However, the CISO never thought to ask, so effectively both parties were to blame. So I offered to remediate. What was clear is that the board had expectations from the CISO that they hadn't communicated, but they were fairly standard expectations of a CISO. The board also hadn't shared enough financial insights to allow the CISO to understand the value of the company and the risks it faced if a cyber event occurred. For example, if the company was worth $100 million, give or take, and they spent $100,000 over the next 2 years on significantly minimizing the threat of the business exploiting the sensitive client data on the dark web, for example, which is an issue which one of their competitors had, then the context was clear. This would be a sensible investment. Without that insight, the CISO was never going to be able to talk sensible numbers to the board. However, the CISO also needed to understand that the board didn't really need to know about what products and configurations, ones and zeros, as they put it, were in place. They just needed to understand the implications of the risks to the business. What the cost of working on sorting their risks today was versus the cost of what would happen if the vulnerabilities were exploited was. The CISO had really underappreciated the strategic nature of the role. They wanted to keep their hands on the keyboard, but informed the CISO that this is what their team is for. The CISO is the bridge between the executive and the technical people. Whilst the CISO needs to understand enough of the tech speak from the technical people, they must also be able to translate that into risk, governance, finance, and compliance in a language which is relatable for the board and other senior management members. In the end, the CISO and the board agreed to come together in a pragmatic way and work out the best approach that all parties would find the most valuable. Whilst it may be uncomfortable for the CISO to learn new skills and adapt to the requirements, ultimately, this will give the CISO the credibility that is required for the executive. For the executive, it gives them the clarity of what is needed to keep their environment secure whilst understanding the risks and costs. This will hopefully have a ripple down effect into the security or IT department, who will be able to see that sign-off on much needed IT infrastructure will be given when the criticality of making such moves is needed, due to the cost of not resolving the areas of vulnerability. I hope you've enjoyed this insight. If you want to chat about your cybersecurity governance or risk, then head over to revolutioninfosec.com. Thanks very much for watching.